Thank you so much. I'd like to start by talking a little bit about Iron Man, who seems like a paradox. When Iron Man first appeared upon the scene, making huge waves in the news, he was an unknown, a robot, an alien, but he soon unmasked himself and proved to be Tony Stark. Could have been Elon Musk, could have been anybody. Tony Stark decided to put together a super suit, and he moves now in these superhuman circles as an ordinary man. Clever, charming, admittedly sexy, an ordinary man. My question is, how? One suit of armor transforms him into a superhuman. What can you tell us as an expert in artificial systems about how that might be possible?
So I mean, Tony Stark he's a billionaire, he's brilliant, incredibly brilliant guy, but at the end of the day, he's just a regular person. And so the incredible things that the Iron Man armors, and we've seen that there are a number of these systems that are heavily modified for different things, are engineered by him to give him these special capabilities. After all, I can't fly, neither can Tony Stark. One of the most important things I see when I look at the videos that they're all over the internet, you can see them, of him taking off really fast and stopping really fast, turning really fast, or even taking an impact from something being thrown at him, is the human body is not meant to take accelerations like that. Those forces are too intense, too great for our bodies to withstand. So that's why the armor, that's the nature of the armor. He has a masterful use of metal alloys, things like aluminum and titanium and gold and other things, that when you put two different metals together, they have different qualities than the original materials. And so that is one aspect of it, the armor itself. And then there are also systems. We don't know a whole lot about them because it's proprietary and he won't share with us as much as we'd like to see what goes on inside. There must be systems inside that do things to help with the acceleration forces, like G-suits that pilots wear, fighter pilots, to help constrict the flow of blood so that it doesn't all pool in his extremities when he's taking off really fast or slowing down. So there must be systems like that, in addition to the systems that help with extra strength and other things like that. So it's engineering at its finest in one sense, but it's designed to give certain very specific capabilities that are needed for different missions.
Well, one of the things that we think that it really is empowered the whole Iron Man suit is this brain-computer interface. I mean, we could talk about Tony Stark for a long time, but I assume this is PG rated, so let's not get into that. But it's a colleague, which is fine. His brain-computer interface are okay. Ours are probably about the same or better, but let's not get into that. Anyway, so for the suit again, so it can really reduce response times, and in all these kind of aspects, as Preston was talking about, like as fast as you can go and change things, if you really basically hack in a way that you can have direct brain control. So if you use, for instance, electroencephalography, so brain waves, to control the suit with direct responses of attention or shifts, you can really produce, in terms of speed, time, responses, and have a different kind of control of the whole system.
So it's effectively operating technology at reflex reaction times.
Exactly, or pre-reflex as you think about it, pretty much.
Are the rest of us anywhere near having technology of this kind?
We're getting there. Again, I won't talk about it, it's proprietary, but we're making some progress.
Well, let's look at the other end of the range, because side by side with Tony Stark, Iron Man, we've seen human beings fighting without obvious augmentation technology. Captain America, as we've seen, seems to be, though human in appearance, legitimately superhuman in ability and speed and strength. And of course, there's the problematic scientist Bruce Banner and the things he's proved himself capable of. What do we know about the possibility of augmenting the biological human being as we've seen?
Well, we know quite a bit about these guys actually, since this thing has become public knowledge and everything has been happening. So in terms of Hulk, we actually know that there's been changes on Hulk's brain, anatomical structural changes. So different areas of the normal human brain, as you go from Bruce Banner to Hulk, get changed. So for instance, your cerebellum gets actually amplified in case of Hulk. You know that he needs to do these very long jumps in space and he needs to figure out what is in space. Some language-related areas on your temporal lobe gets reduced because he doesn't really talk, right? And other aspects like, limbic system, so related to emotional regulation, it's kind of humped up, as we've all seen quite a bit. So we know a bit about some of the anatomical structural changes for Hulk. In terms of Steve Rogers, aka Captain America these days, it's a different kind of brain effect. So as far as we can tell, it's a change on cognitivity. So there's actually something called synesthesia, which is very real, and it happens with a lot of normal humans. It's not a disorder, it's just a change. Where you have alterations of brain connectivity on fibers, on areas that are typically not as connected to each other. That's what we've seen in Steve Rogers. We think that what a serum has done is basically take areas or neural networks that we think that Steve will activate quite a bit related to empathy and thought about others, and basically exponentiate it, the connectivity between those areas. As a side, very cool side effect, you have also extra connectivity between motor areas and visual cortex. So you have these very quick, fast reflexes, which definitely helps him in his job, I think. There's also genetic components and other things to it that Jess can maybe address.
I'm glad we switched over to talking about Captain America, because every time I talk about Stark, I get an inexplicable urge for shawarma. I don't know why. But in terms of the changes, the muscular changes we saw, we know that he was quite small, asthmatic, weakling, and then suddenly he's this sort of epitome of a godlike person. But he was a person who started out as a regular person. And we enhanced him in some way. At first we were trying to figure out, as scientists and as a pharmacologist, I was trying to figure out why and how they changed him, and was it a steroid or what was it? But I think you heard a speaker earlier talking about CRISPR, and I suspect that they were just first to that table. It is basically something that they've discovered from the warfare between bacteria and viruses. And when a bacteria catches a virus, if it survives it, it saves that little DNA code that it got hijacked from that virus, and it keeps it in a little storage area to just like remember this was a bad guy in the past, this was a cootie, and a technical term, cootie. So saves that in the background, and it makes a mirrored puzzle piece to that. RNA and DNA are mirrored pieces to each other, and it saves that. And so basically, anytime it scans down through anything that's going through its DNA, and if it finds that little segment, it knows it's snuck in again, and it can attack it. But that means that we can use that system as basically a GPS for any little segment of DNA. Instead of giving it a virus's DNA, and normally it scans around looking for the virus DNA chunk, we say, hey, find this for me, and it's like Fido. It goes out into the DNA, and it goes and finds that chunk, and goes, oh, found it, and it'll even chop it out for you. If we can go in there and have it find it, that's useful. If we can have it go in there and remove it, that's useful. We can see what happens without it. And even more useful, we could put whatever we wanted in that spot. And so the bodybuilding dogs you saw earlier, that's a natural thing, but basically you can either put something into the body that makes something happen, or you can take something out that's the brakes on what would normally happen. And so what they did in that's a natural dog that has had the brakes on muscle building pulled out. So I suspect that what they did with him is just take off those brakes, and bodybuilding just could go at its full potential. He's still a normal mortal, but he's a mortal that all his biology just went towards reaching the peak of potential.
So that classified project literally edited the DNA of a living organism, not cell by cell, but head to toe.
Yes, it changed, yeah. It's not just giving a drug and letting that go where it will, it altered the DNA permanently.
Extraordinary. Now, relating to Tony Stark, there are also alarming rumors that at times the fighting system in which he's made himself a superhero acts autonomously. There are eyewitness instances of these battle suits fighting on their own, suggesting that they're not just armor to be worn into battle, but perhaps something approaching sentient.
Real quick, the difference between what we see on the battlefield with Stark and what we're able to do with the most advanced spacecraft is worlds apart, because our spacecraft are essentially just really, really smart robots right now, right? And they can call home if they run into a problem. but they're not really smart enough to figure out what to do. Stark's armors clearly have enough intelligence to not only detect a problem, but fix it themselves, which is an incredible advance over what we're able to do in civilian technology.
Yeah, but in terms of AI, like, this is really fairly rudimentary, right? You look at it, the way that AI works is the same way that you teach your toddler how to be a person in this world, right? And so it is all with training data, and Tony gives his robots training data on how to fight. Great. But if you look at the experiences that they get, they're very, very limited, right? Like, if you look more at the self-driving car technology, we drive 2 million miles in full autonomy, and we can experience all of the different things in the environment, and so we can actually train these vehicles to do things that are very, very intelligent and actually solve that next part of the problem, which is how do I react to humans in my world. If you look at what Tony's robots are doing, they're not doing anything near that. They're basically like, go shoot 'em up robots and, you know, woo-woo.
So you're saying you choose the time of the task and you will mop the floor with Iron Man.
Yes.
All right. Taxis at dawn.
Mic drop.
Well, let me ask you a darker question, because the tragic events at Sokovia are said by some to have resulted from a runaway experiment where an autonomous fighting system like the AI that drives Stark's armor actually growing its database and its neural net exponentially to become possibly autonomous, Turing complete. Are there safeguards that we need to be putting in place as we develop our own artificial intelligences to prevent or stave off a repetition of those dark events?
You know, I think that the same way we as parents teach our children to grow up and be decent human beings, we have to think about teaching our robots how to behave ethically and reasonably in this world. And I think that you really start with the training data that you're providing them, and you know, they can only grow up to the information that you're providing them.
So you're saying we actually teach an artificial intelligence much the way we teach children?
Absolutely, it's the exact same way. So you as a parent, you as an AI programmer, you're doing basically the same thing.
So Ultron was badly parented. That's what it
Yes.
comes down to.
Yes.
Preschool for AIs, and we're there.
Well, John, just to say something about that, it's definitely a concern that we should start having, not just in terms of artificial intelligence, but all, you know, neural-related technologies, right? So neuroethics, which is basically a new field out of bioethics, you know, is starting to make its way to society, but it's something that should be paid attention to, because, you know, we can talk about artificial intelligence, and I do think that we're still pretty far from having a sentient system. However, you know, there's definitely a lot of things in between that can be awesome, that can also be in concern. In the same way we talk about superhuman or augmented powers, right? You can think about taking certain pharmacological agents to enhance attention or to enhance some capability. Right now, there's really no regulation for it, but you can imagine society that if we all decide to take that, think about it as a steroids for the brain, if you will, or for your cognitive abilities, right? Then you're going to be put in a situation that if that's not regulated, you want to compete, you need to do the same thing. So yes, I think that we need to start thinking about neuroethics in a more serious and pragmatical way.
You mean the rest of us need to start thinking about it? It's clearly
Yes,
not
we just
something
do
that the
stuff.
Avengers are thinking about a whole lot at all.
No,
That's one of the big
we
problems.
do stuff, guys, think about it. That makes me feel better.
This is just the bitterness of people who couldn't get a gig at Stark Industries. Those options are, well, lawsuits are.
Poaching talent from
It's a
us
free
right now,
idea.
actually.
Exactly. Let's get really weird. As if Ultron wasn't hard to understand, can we talk Thor for a minute? This is an alien being, a kind of, if reports are true, a verified extraterrestrial walking among us with powers that seem almost godlike to us.
Yeah, I mean, unless you've been living under a rock, and if that rock wasn't thrown by something big and green in the last couple of years, you know that we learned we're really not alone. And not only are there this very powerful, as guardians as they're called, Thor and his people. There are the Chitauri aliens that invaded New York City. Who knows how many other races are out there? But one thing that we have to keep in mind as we're encountering, there may be more next week. Something could fall out of the sky right now here in LA. I don't know.
Raccoons.
I don't know. No, I wouldn't believe that, but that's, you can believe what you want. When we encounter these other races, they're going to have technologies that are far beyond anything that we can even imagine. Some things like Thor has this hammer that has all of these incredible powers, or gives him powers. Personally, I don't believe in magic. That's where I stand. Because I believe that fundamentally underneath it all, there's something that can be explained. There's a way to explain that. Some part of the real world, you can explain how that hammer does what it does.
So it may have a motive force beyond your understanding, but you refuse to accept that it could not be understood.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to have some connection to the 4 fundamental forces, or maybe there are 6 fundamental forces and we just haven't discovered them yet.
Any sufficiently advanced technology will appear as magic.
Absolutely. So we have to keep that in mind and not be, we can have our minds blown by what we're seeing and hopefully not blown away, but we have to keep in mind that these are not magical beings. These are real people just from other places.
Well, let me run to the other end of the spectrum, because it's easy in the presence of superhumans, such as we have now seen moving among us, to feel like ordinary people like us no longer matter, to feel reduced. And so for me, it's cause for real hope that shoulder to shoulder with these superhumans, there appear to be, side by side with them, unaugmented human beings, like Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, the Archer Hawkeye. They are performing at what seem like superhuman levels, but they appear to be merely human beings operating at peak abilities.
And they are, right? And they are. I mean, look at Hawkeye. It's a great example, right? Hawkeye has this perfect high-end coordination, right? Exact. You have professional baseball players that can perform at that level. You have Olympians that can perform at that level. So that's not superhuman. We should be happy. It's human. It's us. It's just the best of us in certain kind of performance. So for sure. And I do think that, also think about humans as, if you think about Iron Man or Tony Stark, is what we can do physically and that's what we can do intellectually, and how we can transcend ourselves intellectually. So yeah, I agree with Preston in that sense. We don't agree on much, but on that we do. We should not be, afraid or intimidated. We should try to understand and make sure that we can raise to the same level, and we have been.
Everything you learn, everything you do shapes your brain. Your neuron pathways change. And so grow the pathways that you want and nurture those ones, and you can become what you want to become. Just change your brain, and you can do it through experience.
I was going to say, that's our real superpower, is our
That's
ability
superpower.
to ask questions and interrogate the universe and do the amazing things that we do.
And learn and practice and experience, and be shaped by our experience.
And as we learn, we're actually building new neural pathways in the brain. It's a physical growth and transformation. Is there a measurable higher density of people who have learned greater skills of neural connections in the brain?
There's definitely people who show different aspects of those connections. We mentioned synesthesia earlier on. We do know that connectivity increases and weights between that connectivity increases through time. So yeah, there's a relationship. There's not an A to B exact, but you can definitely look at the patterns and neural patterns and look for it.
Are there people who might be gifted in the same way that Lance Armstrong has higher lung capacity than most human beings, with greater neuroplasticity, with a greater ability to learn?
Yeah, I mean, as Jesse was saying, your brain is changing throughout time, all the time. So you're going to take advantage of that. There's some aspect of genetics and nature, and then there's nurture, and going through it all the time is changing.
And we'll know when they appear. I mean, we'll know about them when they show up.
They will rise among us. Thank you so much for joining us tonight to help us wrap our heads around these momentous events. And things may get stranger still, so please bear with us.